Ba Yamin, entering the days. Cantillation, Targums, Bina, and the soldier who advances into time. Welcome back to our series on Genesis 24, verses 1 through 4. In our first episode we explored the opening letter Vav as the image of the nail, the name Abraham as the container of divine breath, and the pictographic letters of the word Zakan as the portrait of the elder who has fought, endured the cycle of time, and now carries the hidden seeds of covenant future. Today we go deeper into the same verse. We are still in verse 1. Because there is more here than any single session can contain. Genesis chapter 24, verse 1. And Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. Let us now turn the full lens of our examination onto the extraordinary Hebrew phrase Ba Yamin, translated as well advanced in years or as coming into the days. Because in the original language, this phrase is one of the most evocative and theologically charged idioms in the entire book of Genesis, and its depth has barely been touched by most commentaries. The word Ba is from the root bo, meaning to come, to enter, to arrive. In Hebrew, the word bo is used when you enter a room, when you enter a covenant, when you enter the Holy of Holies. It is the word of intentional, physical arrival. And the word Yamin means days. But Yamin is the plural of Yom, and Yom in biblical Hebrew is far richer than the English word day. A Yom is a unit of experience, of encounter, of divine meeting. The 6 days of creation are 6 Yomim, 6 chambers of divine creative encounter. The day of the Lord in the prophets is the Yom Yhwh, the great moment of divine meeting with history. Days in the Hebrew scriptures are not merely units of chronology. They are units of sacred encounter. So Ba Yamin means literally entered into the days, come into the days, arrived within the days. Abraham did not merely accumulate days the way dust accumulates on a shelf. He entered them. He stepped inside them the way you step inside a sanctuary. He inhabited them. He allowed each day to be a room in which he was truly present to the divine encounter it contained. The phrase Ba Yamin is the Hebrew way of saying that Abraham was a man of full presence. He did not sleepwalk through his decades. He showed up to every day as a participant in the divine drama, and because he showed up, the days shaped him into the elder of extraordinary depth that we encounter at the opening of Genesis 24. This distinction between accumulating days and entering days is one of the most practically transforming truths in the entire opening of this chapter. The trauma of a wasted life is not the trauma of having had many difficult days. It is the trauma of having had many days that were not inhabited. Days that were survived but not lived. Hours that were endured but not entered. And the healing of that wound comes not through going back and reliving what was missed but through beginning, today, right now in this moment, to enter the day that is present. To show up to it with the full attention of a soul that knows that every day is a chamber of divine encounter. The God of Abraham meets you inside your days, not above them or beyond them or at the end of them. He meets you now, in the day that is right now. Now let us examine the Masoretic cantillation marks placed on this phrase in the ancient manuscripts. The Torah in Jewish liturgical tradition is chanted, not merely read, and the cantillation marks that appear above and below the Hebrew letters are not merely decorative punctuation. They are a musical system of extraordinary theological sophistication, developed and preserved by the Masoretes, the Jewish scribal academies of the 6th through 10th centuries of the Common Era, who regarded the precise transmission of both the text and its musical rendering as a sacred duty. The cantillation mark placed on the word Zakan in the Masoretic text is the revia, which creates a sustained, rising-falling musical phrase, a kind of musical crown over the word for elder. The revia signals what textual scholars call a disjunctive pause, a moment of musical breath that separates Zakan from what follows it, creating a space of reverence around the word elder before the narrative continues. As if the Torah's own music is bowing before the dignity of this old man before allowing the sentence to move on. The mark on Ba Yaming includes the tipcha, a small angular accent that in the ancient chanting tradition creates a slight melodic drop before a major pause, a gentle downward inflection that sounds, to the ear trained in cantillation, like a musical bow before the weight of a life fully entered. And in the documentary developed by the Masoretic scholars, the Etnach, the great disjunctive accent that functions like a period within the cantillation system, falls on the word Ba Kol, creating the musical structure that goes, Abraham was old, musical pause, he entered the days, musical bow, the Lord blessed him in everything, full musical stop. The entire theology of the verse is encoded in the music before the interpreter has said a single word. The elder's dignity is marked by the revier crown. The depth of his temporal formation is marked by the tipcha bow. And the comprehensive blessing is marked by the Etnach, the full stop, the musical declaration that this statement requires no qualification, no addition, no footnote. The Lord blessed Abraham in all things. Period. Full stop. The Etnach has spoken. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures produced in Alexandria around the 3rd century before the Common Era, translates the phrase Ba Yaming with the Greek construction probabikos hemeron. And this Greek phrase carries a meaning that the Hebrew idiom only implies. Probabikos comes from the verb probainin, meaning to advance forward, to move ahead, to press on into new territory. And its use in the Septuagint specifically carries the military connotation of a soldier who has advanced deep into enemy territory. A soldier who has pushed past the front lines. A soldier who is now operating in the deep interior of a landscape that once seemed impossible to enter. The Septuagint is saying that Abraham has advanced through time the way a seasoned soldier advances through difficult terrain. He has not retreated before the difficulties. He has pushed through them. He has penetrated deep into the territory of his years. He has advanced into his days. And in this military image of the Septuagint, we hear something that the contemporary culture of spiritual retreat and resignation does not want to hear. Abraham is a fighter. Not in the anxious, reactive, self-protective sense of someone fighting to survive, but in the courageous, intentional, forward-pressing sense of someone who has chosen to advance into the fullness of the life God gave them rather than retreating into a defensive position of mere endurance. The elder of Genesis 24 is an advancing elder. He is still pushing forward even in the final chapter of his life. He is still commissioning missions and speaking oaths and investing his deepest resources in a future he will not personally live to see fully flower. He is probabikos hemeron. He has advanced into the days. The Vulgate of Jerome, the great Latin translation of the 4th century, renders the phrase as provectec aetatus, of advance age, but the Latin word provectus carries within it the same sense of forward movement that the Greek probabikos conveys. Provectus comes from the Latin root provahere, to carry forward, to convey ahead, to bear onward. Abraham has been carried forward into age, or perhaps more accurately, he has carried himself forward through age, through the difficulties and the losses and the long seasons of waiting, until he has arrived at the deep interior of his years where only the fully formed elder can stand and speak with the authority that his first words in chapter 24 carry. The Syriac Peshitta, the great translation of the Hebrew scriptures into the Syriac language of the early Christian communities of the Eastern Mediterranean, renders the phrase with an Aramaic idiom that emphasizes the completeness, the saturation of Abraham's years. In the Peshitta's reading, Abraham has been fulfilled in his days. Not merely aged, not merely advanced, but fulfilled. As a vessel is fulfilled when it has been filled to the brim. As a promise is fulfilled when every word of it has been realized. Abraham's days have been fulfilled because he has entered each one and allowed each one to fill him with the specific grace and the specific encounter and the specific formation that God had prepared within it. Targum Onkelos, the most authoritative of the ancient Aramaic paraphrases produced for Jewish communities whose spoken language had shifted from Hebrew to Aramaic, preserves the sense of the Hebrew closely while adding its characteristic note of reverence for the patriarch's completeness of experience. The Onkelos rendering emphasizes that Abraham's years have all been genuinely and fully lived, that none of them were hollow or wasted or spent outside the divine encounter. This resonates with the great Psalm of Moses, Psalm 90, whose prayer is that God would teach us to number our days so that we gain a heart of wisdom. In Onkelos, Abraham has answered that prayer perfectly. Every day numbered. Every day inhabited. Every day's wisdom gathered into the treasury of the elder. Targum Pseudo-Jonathan, the more expansive and theologically adventurous Aramaic paraphrase, adds a dimension that Onkelos does not reach. Pseudo-Jonathan connects Abraham's maturity in this verse to the third of the 10 Sephirot in the Kabbalistic framework of the divine attributes, the Sephirah called Binah, meaning understanding. In the Kabbalistic tradition, the 10 Sephirot represent the 10 ways in which the infinite divine being expresses itself in relation to the finite world. The first Sephirah, Keter, is the divine will. The second, Chokmah, is divine wisdom, the lightning flash of intuitive divine knowing that arrives complete and undifferentiated. The third, Binah, is divine understanding, the womb of the divine mind, the place where the lightning flash of Chokmah is received, gestated, processed, and shaped into something that can actually be transmitted and that can generate new life in the world. Pseudo-Jonathan is saying that Abraham has entered the spiritual stage of Binah. He has processed the raw wisdom of his covenant encounters. He has gestated the lightning flashes of divine revelation he received in Ur and Haran and Canaan and on Mount Moriah. He has allowed the decades to do their slow, deep, transformative work of turning raw spiritual experience into mature, transmittable wisdom. And the evidence that he has entered Binah is precisely what happens in Genesis 24. He does not simply possess wisdom. He transmits it. He gives it away. He pours it into the mission of his servant and into the covenant future of his son. Binah's greatest expression is always generative. The womb of understanding only fulfills its purpose when it gives birth. And Abraham's chapter 24 is the birth of his Binah, the moment when his deepest formation becomes his greatest gift to the generations that will come after him. This is profoundly healing truth for every person who has been in a long and apparently unpredictable season of formation. Perhaps you have been in a wilderness. Perhaps you have been in what felt like a waiting room, a season of no visible progress, no visible fruit, no visible vindication of the promise you have been carrying. The teaching of Binah, embedded in Pseudo-Jonathan's reading of Bar Yamin, is that the seasons of apparent unproductivity are the seasons of deep formation. They are the seasons in which the lightning flash of divine encounter is being gestated into the kind of wisdom that can sustain a generation. They are the seasons of Binah, and they are not wasted. They are the most important preparation for the most important commission. Now let us look at how the opening of this verse functions within the larger literary architecture of Genesis 24, because the text has been shaped not only theologically but artistically, and the artistic shaping carries its own layer of meaning. Biblical scholars working in the tradition of literary and rhetorical criticism have identified in Genesis chapter 24 a magnificent chiastic structure, a literary architecture in which the text mirrors itself in reverse around a central axis, the way a mountain range is reflected perfectly in the surface of a still lake. In a chiasm, the elements are arranged in the pattern A, B, C, D, C', B', A', where the central element, D, carries the theological heart of the entire unit. In Genesis 24 across its 67 verses, the chiastic structure reveals that the absolute center, the theological heart, of this magnificent chapter is the servant's prayer at the well in verses 12 through 14, the moment where a human soul stops beside an ordinary water source and speaks with total honesty and total expectation to the God of heaven and earth. The entire vast narrative of covenant marriage and generational blessing pivots on one man's prayer. The entire architecture of the chapter is constructed around a moment of intimate conversation between a servant and his God. And this tells us something of incalculable importance about how the purposes of God actually advance in the world. Not through strategy alone. Not through wealth alone. Not through social connections or political power or organizational efficiency alone. The center of it all, the pivot point on which all of heaven's purposes turn, is a human soul opening itself to God in honest, specific, expectant prayer. The chiasm of Genesis 24 is the chiasm of the kingdom of God. Everything radiates outward from the center of prayer, and everything returns to rest in the center of prayer. And the first 4 verses we are studying in this series are the opening arm of that chiasm. They are the A element, the first term of the great literary symmetry. Before the journey begins, before the prayer is prayed, before Rebecca appears, the text must establish 4 load-bearing pillars: the character of the patriarch who commissions, the identity of the servant who is commissioned, the solemnity of the oath that binds the mission, and the precision of the direction that orients the mission. These 4 pillars are established in 4 verses. And without them, the entire 67-verse structure of the chapter cannot stand. What does this mean for you personally? It means that the foundation work matters. The character formation that happens before the commission is as important as the commission itself. The establishment of who you are and whose you are and what you are covenanted to and in what direction you are oriented, is the foundation on which every subsequent act of faithful service is built. Too many people want to skip to the moment of the prayer at the well. Too many want to bypass the patient formation of character and go straight to the moment of divine provision. But the chiasm of Genesis 24 will not permit that shortcut. The prayer at center only works because the character established in the opening arm is real. The servant can pray with such confidence and clarity because he has been formed by a lifetime of faithful service to a covenant patriarch who modeled for him what it looks like to trust God in everything. Your formation is not a detour from your destiny. Your formation is the foundation of your destiny. The years of being shaped, tested, refined, and deepened are the years that make you capable of praying the prayer that will change everything when the moment comes. Do not despise the Bar Yamin, the entering into the days of your formation. Advance into them the way the probably-cause soldier advances into enemy territory. Because on the other side of the formation is the commission. And on the other side of the commission is the prayer. And at the center of the prayer is God. A word for your inner healing today. If you have been in a season that felt like nothing was happening, a season of quiet and apparent stillness, let the Bar Yamin of Abraham speak to the deepest chamber of your waiting. You have not been forgotten. You have been formed. The days you have been living have not been empty. They have been filling you, slowly and surely, with the kind of wisdom that only comes from having entered your days rather than merely survived them. And the God who met Abraham in every chapter of his long life, including the chapters that looked like mere survival, is meeting you in your days too. Right now. In this one. Subscribe and stay with us for episode 3. In our next session we will go deep into the Peel stem of Barak, the kneeling etymology of blessing, the Aleph Tav mystery, the Gematria of Bakol, and the voices of Rashi, the Ramban, Origen, and Augustine on the totality of divine blessing. Reach out to us at Christ4Life143@gmail.com for prayer and deeper study connection. Stay tuned. We continue verse by verse, layer by layer, treasure by treasure.